in July. It is now August. Happy August. Okay, we are now live. So we're going to do a little nigun, this time really without words. Rabbi Crystal has Kutz Camp in his background, and this is a nigun, a melody that I learned at Kutz Camp. And I remember singing it under the willows as we gathered in a very, very large circle, camp-wide circle, song leaders in the center to welcome in Shabbat. Are you up and ready to go now?
Josh is telling me that he can't make me a co-host.
You are a co-host, though. I just made you one.
Oh.
I mean, do you want me to share slides? I can see if I can do it.
You should be able to. I just made you a co-host.
Oh, okay. All right.
Especially on this Shabbat Nachamu, where we hope for a time when we will have a world of peace, a world built of love. We join together in the words of Olam Chesed Yivarech.
May the one whose spirit is with us in every righteous deed be with all who work for the good of humanity and bear the burdens of others, and who give bread to the hungry, who clothe the naked and take the friendless into their homes. May the work of their hands endure, and may the seed they sow bring abundant harvest.
Continue with Asher Yatzar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar adam b'chokhmah, u'v'ra'avo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisei kvodecha, shemipatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, yifshar litkayem v'la'amod lefanecha, Baruch atah Adonai rofecho basar u'matzil asot. Elohai neshama shenatani Jehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatani אתה יצרת ואתה נפחת בי, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי. מודה אני לפניך, אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי ואמותיי, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. ברוך אתה אדוני, אשר נפש בידו כל חי, ורוח כל בשר איש. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לשכל ובינה, להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, פוקח עברים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, מתיר אסורים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, מתיר רוקח הארץ על המים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המכין מצעדי גבר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, מלביש ערומים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, הנותן ליעף כוח. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המעביר שינה מעיני ותנומה מעפעפיי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני בצלם אלוהים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני בת חורים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בגבורה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוטר ישראל בתפארה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the world, who commands us to engage in the study of Torah.
Yep.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I know. I can't see the script. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem at all. No
I'm
problem at
having
all.
a technical.
That's how I live my life these days. If
I
it
know,
wasn't-
and I never used
if
to
it
have
was,
this trouble.
if it wasn't for Rabbi Gorbin, I would be stuck here in isolation.
We seekers of God, but I don't have the text in front of me. I'm sorry. Can somebody follow up for me?
I can read it if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we seekers of God, how do we find you? In good deeds and in the study of Torah. And your search for us, you find us in the bending of the knee, in the rigor of study, in the honesty of commerce, through a good heart, through decency, in respect, true fellowship, companionship, and love, through truth and peace, in the no that is really no, and the yes that is really yes. Baruch atah Adonai. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go.
Okay, Baruch atah Adonai, ha-melamed Torah le'amo Yisrael.
אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, ואלו הם. אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור,
that's one of my favorites. The Kaddish D'Rabbanan, growing up in the Reform movement, I like to say we didn't learn from the Kaddish D'Rabbanan. So I want to share with you two things. First, the question that I'm not going to ask today, but may ask next week, and where it comes from, and then the question that I will ask today. So as you know, I am a big fan of Zappos. If you didn't know that, you will see that over and over. I consider myself a Zapponian. I went to a 3-day seminar at Zappos, and I love their motto of their #1 value is to live and deliver wow. And so Zappos builds a culture based on finding the people that are going to fit into their culture. And so I'm reading a Zappos book. And one of the questions that they ask people, they like to ask off the wall questions like, how lucky are you? You can think about that for yourself. Another one is, if you were to enter a room, what would be your theme song? So that seemed like a big question that might stump people. So you have a week to think about it. Actually, I will tell you that when I read the question, I immediately came up with an answer. It's more fun to see what your immediate reactions are. So let me then do an easier question. I know now everybody's going to be obsessing about that question all week. It's going to be like an earworm. So an easier question is, what is one place that you've traveled to that's been a memorable place? Either some place that you went with someone that made the place memorable, a place of beauty, a trip, or even a local place. As you see, I have Kutz Camp in my background. That is not my place, but it is my subversive dealing with reality. Whoever is going to be our moderator today, what is your place?
I'll do it. All right, reverse Zoom name alphabetical order today. So Tom, you usually last, but you're first, and then Tanya, and then Schumann.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tom McIntyre, and a lot of folks know I was stationed in Panama, and we had a 4-day weekend. We rented a sailboat and went to Contradora. It's the island. That's not the island. It's a island where when nobody would take the Shaw, he stayed there for a while. It's a very, very nice place. And as you'd expect, dollars went pretty far. You couldn't break a 10.
Josh, you threw me for a loop. I'm used to being able to relax. I'm going to say the Greek islands. When I got my master's degree, I treated myself to a trip to the Greek islands, and I like to go where there aren't very many people. So instead of the main islands, I went to an island called Milos, which is where they found the Venus de Milo. And it's the island that it's the second island that has a caldera after Santorini, and it was spectacular, and there aren't any people, so I highly recommend it.
Barbara Schumann. I'm going to go with a trip that we took in 2002 on the semester at sea, when we traveled around the world in 100 days and visited 10 different countries, and they were all special.
Larry Schumann, and I'm going to go with Bali, where we've been twice to visit our son.
Very nice. Do you want us to go out of alphabetical order, Josh?
We have house guests.
Yes, since we're
House guests are included.
we're bending the COVID rules here a little bit. So this
You have
is,
to tell your name.
oh, Lynn Maggot Lazar, and Dale is here, and I'm gonna guess he'll agree with me, but he can speak for himself. But we went to Antarctica, and we literally just did this past January. We feel very lucky that we got to do it and came off of that trip pretty much right before the pandemic crashed around us, and it was life-alteringly beautiful and exceptional experience to visit Antarctica.
All right, Sarah, Ruth, and then Ronnie.
Well, there's so many places. Israel, always. And I was thinking also of a trip that my husband and I had taken to Vermont, which was really unique. But I have to say, most recently, it was being in China and being at the Great Wall.
Okay, are you done? Okay, great. So at first I was going to say the beach at Stone Harbor because that's my favorite, and I'm very nostalgic and a bit sad because this is the first year in a long time that we won't be there. But I would like to say something else. I would like to say Big Sur, because I was there a few times and I loved the sunrise. I loved everything about it. And I have to tell you, my brother who died last year, his ashes are spread all over Big Sur. And if you know who Jerry Katz is, he's a treasurer of Temple Sinai and a dear friend of our son. He went there last year and said to me, I'm praying near his ashes. We don't know where they are. And because it was before Rosh Hashanah. And so Big Sur has a great meaning in our family.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Ronnie, that was beautiful, Ruth. So many. I'm going to go with Camp Maccabee, Pelican Lake, Wisconsin, and Ben Aronin, for those who may know about it. I was there about 6 years, and we did a reunion about a month ago, a virtual reunion, and it was just incredible to see people I haven't seen for decades.
I want to acknowledge Monica, who, as we know, watches and participates in her own way. And so next is Natalie, Michelle, and then Mag, I believe.
Before we go on for that, Monica, you're up next week for a question because it was asked this week, so you can share your answer before Shabbat. And we can share it for you.
Hey, hi, Natalie. There are so many places I could pick, but what came to mind first was a unexpected one-day trip to Buenos Aires, which I've been thinking a lot about. Two places that I really want to go because I'm going just a tiny bit stir crazy, not just from the quarantine, but just from having traveled a lot and then kind of coming back to Pittsburgh in 2012 and barely leaving the state. So this was, I think, 2008, 9-ish. I used to fly to Brazil a lot and I had very little money, so I would get the cheapest flights. So this flight happened to have 2 layovers, and one of them was in Argentina, which kind of makes no sense, but that's what it was. And my flight ended up getting delayed. So I got to spend a day in Argentina in a hotel, which at the time I was very frustrated. Now thinking back to that, I wish I had taken more or had been a little bit more excited about that, because I would love to go there now.
Hi, I'm Michelle Clark, and I miss traveling. That's one of the problems that we've had, is all the cancellations with things we go to. But the thing that popped into my mind first is Cambodia and Angkor Wat. And it is just such a special country. It's such a special place. and visiting some of the ruins that haven't been dug up and seeing where the landmines still are, unfortunately, and just the people. And it was just very exotic and very endearing and warm, just very warm. Really enjoyed it.
All right, I'm not seeing who Mag is, but feel free to jump in. All right, my list just got out of order. So I think next is Lynn. Lynn, and Kate.
I have Mag unmuted.
Ah.
What happened to you?
Also, you forgot Marcy.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. The reverse was a really bad idea. The order, it keeps jumping around. So, and I'm not good at reverse alphabetical order. Mag, you're up.
So my name's Mark Gruber, and the picture I put behind me is of the Dolomites. It's the Italian Alps. And it's funny because usually I escape to the woods, but this is above the tree line. So there weren't any woods, but it was such a place of magnificent beauty. And even there in the hot summer where we had a hike about 5 hours, I guess, to get up into this area where the formation behind me is called the Three Sisters. The whole thing was just so inspiring. And because I've talked about, I waited 4 years, the first time I was supposed to go there, and waylaid it for a side trip to visit a friend in Germany instead, because our flight was going through Frankfurt, and so gave up the Dolomites, and then made a point of getting there, and now want to get back. It just is such a magnificent, magnificent place. And the formations of the mountains were caused by corals that were under the sea, that were reaching in some, pre-human era, reaching toward the sun from under the seabed, and managed to push themselves forward. And so you get these incredibly magnificent formations in the rock itself, plus the vistas and everything else you see. So any case, that's a favorite place.
Wonderful and welcome. All right, so corrected. We're going to have Marcy and Tom, and then Lynn N, and then Lynn R.
Okay, Marcy Morton. My most memorable place was we took a tour to Eastern Europe maybe 15, 20 years ago. And one of the places we toured through was Auschwitz. And I will never forget that place.
Tom, I'm thinking in particular of a trip to Bhutan. It's a tiny country high in the Himalayas, which is very peaceful, and the people are very spiritual. It reminds me a lot of what Tibet must have been like before the communists took over. Like that.
Lynn Naiman, I have to say the trip to Israel that I took in 2004 with Rabbi Jamie and several people who are in the room at the moment. So that would be, I think, the most spectacular trip that's on my mind.
So when you ask that, Rabbi, so many things rush, so many good memories rush forth, but I'm going to share a couple just quickly. So, because it was unexpected, I was on a cross-country trip with friends, and we were going through South Dakota and did Mount Rushmore, fine. But going to the Crazy Horse Memorial was surprisingly very spiritual and very moving, and it was unexpected. And I spent a lot of time also in Sedona in Red Rock country, which is always so beautiful. But probably my most memorable is my very first trip to Israel. I was pregnant with my son. And it just somehow changed the nature, I think, of the trip for me. And particularly going through Yad Vashem and the Children's Memorial. It was 30 years ago and it's still so clear like it was yesterday.
Liz, Lori, and Kate.
Lori, how about you go first?
Okay. I'm Lori Mulvey, and for some reason I'm having some technical difficulties. So after this, I'm going to go out and come back in. But the first thing that came to mind was after I retired about 3 years ago now, I guess, my husband and I went to Rocky Mountain National Park and hiked for a couple of days. It was gorgeous. It was spiritual. It was relaxing. It was just the two of us, which is a rare opportunity for us. And it is a trip I would love to take again.
It's a tough one for me. It's Liz Miller, because so many of you have said, this are the flood of memories of all of these amazing trips and travel, and reflecting for a moment on the privilege of being able to take these trips. But I think the one that was most memorable for me was when our kids were quite little, 5 and 10, and we were driving cross country from Boston to our new job in Sacramento. And I think including the fact that I was actually not employed at the time, right? I had quit my one job in Boston and had not taken the new job yet. You know, I had an entire month where I was not accountable to an employer, was part of, I think, the very liberating aspect of this trip. But I think being on a raft on the Snake River, seeing incredible wildlife with our family, and just that moment, I can still take myself back to that moment of just complete peace and appreciation for the magnitude and the beauty of, you know, our earth.
Okay, hi guys. Kate Passarelli. So I have two things. So as a family, my kids and I love to escape reality and go to Disney World. Before the pandemic, we, you know, went sometimes once or twice, sometimes 3 times a year. Obviously we haven't been in a while. We didn't actually go last year at all because of Bennett's bar mitzvah. And so that's kind of been put on hold. And then years ago, a group of friends and I went to Vegas, and I'm really not a Vegas person at all. So I actually rented a car and went exploring outside, and like went to Arizona and, you know, took a drive and went hiking and went to go see the Hoover Dam, and that was really memorable. So just kind of being on my own. So that was what came to mind on my end. So.
Off my game. Karen, Joe, and then Joan.
Hi, Karen Frank. I guess the most memorable, or one of them, was a trip to Buenos Aires where I went to attend a family wedding.
Uncle Joe in a lot of places, but July 2008, 12 years ago, with my children and grandchildren in Israel for a month, which prompted me to take notes, actually keep a diary on a daily basis, and then write it all up. So my 4th greatest adventure. at that point. The other three will remain nameless at the moment, unless you want to read the story. You can ask me for it.
Hi, Joan Stein. Memorable and productive. December 1984, I went with a group of Jewish singles to Cancun. And in Cancun, I met Mark, my late husband, who actually lived 6 blocks away from me in Wilkinsburg. And so we spent a week in Cancun, fell in love, came home and went back to Cancun 10 months later for our honeymoon.
Whoops. Jan, Jake and Rebecca and Frank.
I keep going back and forth about what trip I want to mention because everyone's stories have sort of prompted my memory. But I think the trip I would mention is a bike trip with a women's group to Moab, Utah, and Arches National Park and Canyonlands. There's a beauty out there in the Southwest that just can't be beat, and it was a terrific trip.
Are we up, Josh? I think so.
Yep.
I'm Rebecca. It's funny that I went right after Jen because we spent our honeymoon in that very place, Jen. But the trip that I want to mention is actually one that I took alone. It's probably the only trip that I ever kind of planned and did alone, which was a multi-day hike up the Straits of Juan de Fuca in Canada. And I happened to go in August. It was really kind of an accident that I went the week that the whales were migrating. And so I had a chance to hike with the whales, and they were literally like 20 or 30 feet away from me, and it was so magical. And I just had this sense of the unity of all of the beings in the world.
So I'm Jake, and boy, there's so many to pick from, but the trip I'm going to share is inspired by an article that I read recently in the paper about how the pandemic is affecting indigenous people around the world. And it reminded me of a medical mission I went on years now, actually decades ago, into the Amazon rainforest. And this was a mission it was actually with a Christian fundamentalist group. We flew on a commercial jet to Caracas, and then on I guess it was still a commercial prop plane into Amazonas, and then on this little Cessna deep into the Amazon jungle, into a dirt strip. And then we hiked for 2 days into the villages of the Yanomamo. And we met villagers that had never met white people before, and we were there to treat malaria and to help prevent malaria. And I spent almost like 10 days in the bush with indigenous people. And it's a culture and a place that no longer exists. It has been transformed both ecologically and culturally. It's now gone. So that's just a memory. And so that's what I'd like to share. Yeah.
I'm thinking of two places. One is the entrance plaza, looking at the wall in Jerusalem. And last January was when I was on top of the mountain skiing in Breckenridge, Colorado, about 13,000 feet. and the vista of the mountains and everything was just spectacular.
All right, Floby, and then the Gordons, and then Eileen Y.
I just feel we're all so lucky that we have so many trips to choose from, and the same is for Toby and me. But to me, it's just amazing. We came back on March 3rd from an African safari where we were on safari for 2 weeks every day. And on March 13th, we started to quarantine. So even though I keep thinking of all these trips I've taken with family, especially the trip we took with our granddaughters to Machu Picchu and the Galapagos, I can't help but constantly remember our last trip, our African safari.
Yeah. Toby Chapman, the most beautiful place I have ever seen is Bryce Canyon. But in terms of something meaningful, Flo actually mentioned going with our granddaughters to the Galapagos particularly, and this African trip where we were so close to wild animals, within 12 feet of a pride of lions, and one mother lion suckling her cubs. And it was just absolutely amazing.
We next, Josh, I think.
Yep.
Somebody else. Okay. Again, I'll echo so many people with different trips. There's things we did with our kids and grandkids, which of course are very, very special, but they're not here to hear me, so I'll say something else. I'm going to go with my very first impulse, which was the place I go in my mind when I want to relax and think of a peaceful place, and that is the beach on the windward side of Oahu, which is in Kailua. To me, it was the ideal beach because it had shade, which I'm a big fan of. There were trees and gentle water where you could swim, and sometimes swimming with turtles. So when I think to myself, okay, where I need to get away and be peaceful, I do picture that beach in my mind. I should mention, by the way, that it's no longer true. Again, it's like some people mention, it's a place that really no longer exists because it was discovered by tourists, so that instead of a peaceful beach, it became a beach where busloads of tourists showed up and kind of flooded the place. But I'll go back further in my mind to when it was a very peaceful and just if you know the Hebrew word of shalva, peace and comfort. So. Oh, I didn't say my name. Elizabeth Gordon. I think I've done that every week lately, not said my name.
My name is Jerry Gordon. In 1972, Elizabeth and I made Aliyah to Israel, and we lived in Jerusalem for 7 years. And there we experienced, in Hebrew, livnot ulehitbanot, to build and to be built by. And that was the most significant experience.
Shabbat Shalom, I'm Eileen Yaknin. I'm back after being away, so I get to meet the new Karen Gorbin and the new Daryl Crystal. Hello. It's nice to see you all and everybody. And I'm going to be fast, but I thought, well, I haven't been here a month, so I can take a little liberty, and because I can't think of just one. So one would be what Sarah wrote down there. I was thinking about the trip that I got to take as a perk for being a Sunday school teacher and then taking a 2-year course with Rabbi Perman and Rabbi Simons, and perk was going to Israel, which I invited my mother to go with me. The first time she had been to Israel. That was wonderful. Growing up in Puerto Rico, we got to go to one of the very few in the world phosphorescent bays where microorganisms light up the ocean in little sparkling and thousands of sparkling, look star-like appearances in the water. And my most memorable trip for, I believe for me, of the places I've gone is
went to Nicaragua during the time of the Sandinista Revolution with a group of women to help where Nicaragua was being assaulted by the United States and embargoed, and they were struggling terrifically. And we went to help pick coffee in the mountains of a very poor Nicaraguan town. And then finally realizing that, as I had said before, so many people, we're so fortunate to be able to travel, but actually having learned to appreciate once again the beauty in our backyards, and having discovered so many new amazing trails in Frick Park, including a trail where we saw Beaver Dam, and there is a friend of ours did see the beaver, and a new trail also where somebody told us foxes live. So check those out as well.
It's great to see you again, Eileen. And we have the other Eileen, and then Carol and Rick, and then Bruce.
The very first place that came to my mind was Presque State Park in Erie, and our cottage that was nearby, which has shade beaches. But the place I decided to mention most is a small village in rural Honduras that I went to when I was 18 and changed my life, called Zambrano. And even though I was there to give vaccinations, we also taught English a bit. And I still remember the class of children saying, "I live in Zambrano," because the English words were hard, but they knew Zambrano. That's it.
Hi, everybody. Well, we're supposed to be in Europe right now, which obviously we can't do. I'm thinking of a trip that we took, was it a year ago? Just a year ago, to Spain and Portugal with the World Union for Progressive Judaism. Highly recommend their trips. And we learned all about the history of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, which I had so little knowledge, and learned so very much, and still learning today. But anymore, I just appreciate being able to go in my backyard and get out of the house. Okay.
In 2004, Carol and I were on a trip with Rabbi Gibson, Lynn Naiman, and 25 other people. When we came into Jerusalem for the first time, and we pulled to the side of the road, and Rabbi Gibson said, it was like a galvanizing moment. It was really, really special. So thank you.
Bruce?
The trips to Israel that I've taken have been all very special, but the thing that came to mind was a trip to Alaska. The thing that I still remember is we rode on a train for 4 hours from Fairbanks to the South Coast, and for 4 hours we didn't see a single sign of human habitation. It was extremely impressive, and I remember it to this day.
All right, the home stretch. We have Bonnie, Bob, Gelman, and then Aya and Bob. And then anyone else I missed, I apologize. Go after Aya.
My name is Bonnie Gillis. Such a rich experience being in this group. This is the second time I've been here, and having time to look at each one of you and hear something personal from each one of you. It's amazing to me. My place is Yosemite in the high country. I went with my daughter when she finished graduate school, and with my older brother after he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And we lay down on a blanket at one point. We were there for a week. at night we lay on a blanket with our arms around each other and just looked at the stars for a long time. And it was very awe-inspiring, and I just had a sense of, this is my daughter, this is my beloved older brother, and this is God. This is the sky and my land, and we belong here. It was beautiful. Thank you.
It's my turn, huh? We've traveled quite a bit, and I was thinking about my trip to Israel with Rabbi Perman. I was thinking about my trip to China, and I'm thinking about the trip to Eastern Europe that I visited with my wife's distant relatives who are still alive, who spoke no English at the time. But I ended up thinking about our trip to Panama. About 30 years ago, we had a foreign exchange student living with us from Panama. She was from the western provinces of Panama, and her father, who was high up in the Noriega regime, and that's a different story. We won't go there. But several years after she went home, we decided to visit her family. And we flew into San Jose, Costa Rica with another couple, and not having a good head at the time, we spent a couple days in San Jose and then found a local bus that went into David, Panama. David is a small city there. And we took the bus, which everything you can think about a local bus in Panama was true at the time. We took the bus to the Panamanian Costa Rican border. Everybody had to get out and walk through a no man's land between the one country and the other country. And this was a giant flea market is the best way I can put it. And the bus traveled with our luggage through it. And we got to the Panamanian side. We were in line at an open air customs place. And wife and I were in line, and this military individual came up to us, grabbed my passport out of my hand, and spoke to me in fluent Spanish. Habla Inglés? Not at all. He didn't speak any English, and my Spanish was remarkably poor. And I thought I was in deep trouble. I thought it was going to be an international incident. After I tried to communicate with him and I could not, I shouted out, "Does anybody here speak English?" Fortunately, there was somebody in line, and the individual in line said all the military man wanted was, we got a telephone call from my former foreign exchange student, wanted to know whether she wanted to meet us at the border or whether we're going to take the bus all the way into David. So we said, the message was we're going to take the bus all the way into David. During this hubbub, we forgot to get our passport stamped. We got back on the bus, got it by about 5 kilometers back into Panama. Bus stops where another military man gets on the bus, looks at all the passports, sees that our passports are not stamped, and says, you gotta go back. And we are embarrassed. All I could say is lo siento, I'm sorry, Yeah, the whole busload turned around, went back to customs. The driver got somebody else to take our passports to the custom place. They stamped it, and we took the bus from that point into the city of David. That we'll always remember. That's the story.
I'm Aya Vitansky. What I'm thinking of is one of the first trips that Bob and I took after the end. This was after the end of grad school. We didn't have kids yet. We had some time to spend in Europe. And when we were in Italy, we thought about going to the island of Capri, but decided it was too crowded. And so instead we went to the island close to it, Ischia. And at that point, it's like what Elizabeth said, I'd rather remember it the way it is now, because I'm sure it's very touristy now, but I'd rather remember it the way it was then. It was very peaceful. We had no idea where we were staying, but some guy met us at the ferry landing and said, I have a cheap new hotel for you. It turned out to be actually a very nice hotel that was just opening. And we just had a great time there for several days. Wonderful meals late in the evening, and beach, and everything you could want, the whole Italian atmosphere.
Shabbat Shalom, I'm Bob Kraut, and probably the most memorable trip and most interesting was spending 3 weeks by myself in India, and mainly doing kind of walking around in cities. And so while everyone is talking about being peaceful and relaxed, this was definitely not the experience there, but it was just so interesting because life occurred on the streets. And so you got to see kind of what was happening in people's lives in ways that you can't if you're going to a more developed country.
While I take a moment inspired by Bob's story to remind everyone that we are live streamed on YouTube, did I miss anyone? I'm Josh. Solomon is back here. We've been blessed to be in many places, but my first instinct was to think of sailing trips I go with my father on the Chesapeake Bay when I was in high school and college, and the quiet and the peace and the going hours without talking. Rabbis?
So I've been thinking about a lot of different trips and also places that I've lived. Hawaii was definitely a very beautiful place. Ended up spending about a week in someone's in-law cottage. A friend from college's parents lived in Hawaii and let me stay with them. So I got to explore sort of the back areas of Hawaii where the native or the residents live, and rather than being where all of the tourists were. But then I would say that just in general, my place is the Berkshires, the Massachusetts Berkshires. My grandmother has a house there, and it is always my favorite place, one of my favorite places to go in the entire world.
Thank you, everybody. Wow. Last summer, I went to Germany, and I was there for 2 weeks. And, when I was planning to go, some people said to me, why is it, how can you go to Germany? And having, been, other places in Europe, Germany was important to learn the stories. And it was funny because I wasn't planning on buying souvenirs there. And what was amazing to me, it wasn't like going to Italy or going to France and seeing the country, but it was the story of the history of the nation. And throughout Germany, for those that haven't been there, there are documentation centers where the story of World War II is told. And, there were various groups that went through, school groups and other groups. And then seeing throughout the country, they're called in English stumbling stones, but stones that are embedded in the sidewalks where people who lost their lives in the Shoah, where they had their last known place of residence. And so it was a remarkable story of descent, of teshuvah, and of rebuilding. And the last time I had been in Germany was for 3 days, literally, to learn about the during the at the height of the refugee crisis. So experiencing the country in that way was really amazing. And I also have this very great fondness for this German apple cake pie thing. So when I got diverted and had to fly through Munich on my way to Israel, I was very happy to stop and get my pie cake. Yeshua, thank you, everybody.
We're going to continue with Psukei de Zimra. And if we can actually go straight to Hareini. There we go, thank you. Let's join together. Hareini mizamenet et pila hodot ul halel ul shabechet bori. With this do I prepare myself to thank, praise, and glorify my Creator. Blessed are you, Sovereign of life, whom we praise with songs of glory. Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal batish bachot. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, uzamer l'shimcha elyon. Lehagid b'boker chastecha, be'emunatcha ha'elot, alei azor ve'alei navel, alei higayon v'chinot. Sela. Ashrei shekachalo, Ashrei Shadonai Elohim. De'ela David, Aromim Chalohai HaMelech, V'avarcha Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed. L'chol yom avarcheka, V'alala Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed. Gadol Adonai V'ulam Me'od, Belim Dolato in Cheker. Dor l'dor Yishavach Masecha, U'gvuratecha Yagidu. Adar Kivod Hodecha, V'divrei Niflotecha Asicha. Lezuz Meratecha Yomeru, U'gdulatcha Saprena. Zecher of Tuvcha Yabiu, V'tzidkatcha Yiranenu. Chanun Erchum Adonai, Erech Apayim Dol Chesed. Tov Adonai Lakol, V'rachamav Al Kol Masav. Yoducha Adonai Kol Ma'asecha, V'chasidecha Yevarchucha. Yevod Malchutcha Yomeru, U'gvuratcha Yedaberu. Leodia Livnei Hadam Gvurotav, U'chvad Hadar Malchuto. Malchutcha Malchut Kol Hamim, U'memshaltecha B'chol Dor V'dor. Somech Adonai L'chol Hanoflim, V'zokef L'chol Hakfufim. Einei Chol Elachai Saberu, V'atanotem Lahem Et Ochlam Bito. Poteach Et Yadecha, U'maspil L'chol Chai Ratzon. Ladig Adonai V'chol Derachav, V'chasin B'chol Masav. Karov Adonai L'chol Korav, L'chol Asher Yikra'u V'emet. Ritzon Yiriyav Yaseh, V'et Shavatam Yishma V'yoshiem. Shomer Adonai Et Kol Ohabav, V'et Kol Harshayim Yashmin. Tilat Adonai Yedaber Pi, V'yivarech Kol Basar Shem Kodsho Le'olam Va'ed. V'anachnu nevarech Ya, Ve'ata Ve'ad Olam. Hallelujah. By the way, if someone would like to join me in the responses next week or join Cantor Berman in the responses next week, that would probably be very much appreciated. That is a lot of singing with no break.
Milufinu. Even if our mouths were full of song as the sea, and our tongues full of joy and countless waves, and our lips full of praise as wide as the sky's expanse, and were our eyes to shine like sun and moon, if our hands were spread out like heaven's eagles, and our feet swift like young deer, we could never thank you adequately, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, to bless your name for a 10,000 of the many myriads of times you granted favors to our ancestors and to us.
Israel, Bangala, Bangala, Uvizman Kariv, Vemeru, Amen. Yehishmera Bamevarach, Ve'alam Olam Me'almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemed Kudashah Brichu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma v'meru. Amen. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? La 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 la
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oser shalom uvorei et hakol. Ha'me'ir la'aretz v'la'adarim aleha barachamim, uv'tuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha ve'al me'orei or she'asita, yifaruch hasela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkeh chulanu mehera le'oro. Baruch ata Adonai yotzer ha'me'orot.
How deeply you have loved us, Adonai, our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion, on account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life. Be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. Gather us in peace from the four corners of the earth and lead us upright to your land. For you, O God, work wonders. You chose us, truly you drew us near to your great name, that we might acknowledge you, declaring your one in love. Praise be you, Adonai, who chooses your people Israel in love. Baruch atah Adonai, haboher be'amo Israel b'ahava.
I'm going to go back up to the Hebrew. Shema Yisrael Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר נוקעים מצווך היום על לבבך ושניתם לבניך ודיברת בם והפשטך ביתך וברכך לדרך ושכבך וקומך ופשטום להיות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בעיניך Utatam Amazot Beteka Uvish Areka Vayomer Adonai Moshe Memor the Bear El Bnei Israel V'Omarta Elohim V'Yasu Mehem Zitzit Al Kenfei Vigdihem Medoratam V'Natu Al Zitzit Hanaf Patil Tekeli Vehaya Machem Mazitzit, Uratem Oto, Uzchatem et Kol Mitzvot Adonai, Va'asitem etam, V'mod Taturu, Akari Mevankem, Ve'akari Enaikem, Asher Atem Zonim Arakim, Noman Tisru, Va'asitem et Kol Mitzvotai, Vihitem Kidoshim Leohekem, Ani Adonai Elohekem. Asher Hotziatkem Eretz Mitzrayim Liyot Lachem Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Emet, there is no place where you are not. Even in the wilderness, there is your word. Emet, the pen strokes of lightning, white fire, black flame, stir the soul of passion, soul's passion, guide our sacred way. True and enduring is Torah. Your truth for us is certain and established now and forevermore. Like Moses, Miriam, and all Israel, we sing out and rejoice.
Sur Yisrael, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Ufdechinu Mecha Yehuda veYisrael, Go Aleinu Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. Adonai, Zefatai Titach, Ufi Agite Ilatecha. Adonai, Zefatai Titach, Ufi Agite Ilatecha. Oh God, open up my lips as I begin to pray. Oh God, open up my lips as I begin to pray. Adonai, Zefatai Titach, Ufi Agite Ilatecha. Adonai, Zefatai Titach, Ufi Agite Ilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gamel Chasadim Tovim Mekonei HaKol, V'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevii gula livnei bneihem, leman shemo be'ahava, melech chozer Moshiach u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai magen Avraham v'ezrat Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechayei hakol atara ve'oshia, morid hatal. Mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechayei hakol berachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofeh cholim, umatir asurim, ומקיים אמונתו בשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומידה מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצליח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. תקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, מקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, אלוהי הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו ומגנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ורחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם. אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
To all generations, we will declare your greatness, and for all eternity proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, shall never depart from our lips. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God.
ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך קוראי עונג, ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, ישמחו במלכותך קוראי עונג. Yes, במנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך. סבנו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך. וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת. והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה ורצון שבת קודשך. ונוחו בישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Continue our prayers using the words on the screen, the words on the page, or the words inscribed on our hearts. See you back in a few minutes. Baruch Ata Adonai, HaMevarech et Amo Yisrael Bashalom.
So we've been exploring some different Hasidic stories. And in the Reform movement, there are sort of two ways, broad strokes of looking at the world. Boy, I like the way that I'm totally inserted in Kutz camp. So one way is the rationalist way, coming out of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. Rabbi David Ellenson, I was at a lecture and he said at one point that HUCJIR and the conservative and reconstructionist movements are rabbinic programs are all rationalist. The other movement in the Reform movement is NIFTY and the youth movement, which is based on radically accepting everybody. This is the place where you're accepted for being you. And it's based on wonderful song sessions and sometimes ecstatic song sessions, comparable to when I've been at, like at the Karlbach Shul, when I was at a retreat with them, it was sort of like a Jewish mosh pit. For when the men were dancing, when the women were dancing, it's much gentler. And so in the Hasidic world, there are sort of different ways that Hasidut is transmitted. The one way is through the drashot, and those were the talks that the Rebbe would give on Shabbos afternoon, in Yiddish, of course, and then they were transcribed and formed into books based on the Torah portions. Another way, which my teacher Levi Cooper talks about, is Hasidut translated through halacha. But the way that we often think of Hasidut is through stories. And let me give also this preface that there is a world which we think of as the neo-Hasidic world. So in their day, the different Hasidic groups were the radical thinkers of their day, and over time they shifted to become, meticulously concerned with observance, but not necessarily having that radical spirit that we see in the classic Hasidic works. And what we call new or neo-Hasidut is looking back to that spirit. All of that is a long introduction to a classic story. So a classic story is that, and please pardon the prevalence of male characters, which is of a particular era, is of a story of a man named Yitzhak. And he is a very poor man and has a family to raise, and falls asleep, and one night has a dream that he'll travel from his home to the city of Warsaw, and there underneath the bridge he'll find a buried treasure. And so it's kind of thinks, what did I eat last night? But the next night he has the exact same dream. And so he realizes, maybe this dream is true. And he travels from his home and goes to Warsaw. He actually finds the bridge, but the dream was sort of unifocused. And what the dream didn't show was that the bridge was in front of the king's castle. And he didn't quite know what to do because he thought, well, if I dig in front of this bridge, then either they're gonna think I'm a spy, and I'll end up in jail, or I'll find the buried treasure and they'll take it away from me. So, you know, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and finally the captain of the guard comes up to him and says, "So what are you doing here?" And in fear, Yitzhak, blurts out the story about the dream one night and a second night, and then traveling to the bridge. And of all things, it was the last reaction that Yitzhak thought that he would get. The captain of the guard began to laugh and said, "What a silly person you are. I had a dream about a man named Isaac, Isaac, Yitzhak, it's the same person, and that I'd leave here and I'd travel all the way to a small town, and I'd dig under his fireplace and I'd find a buried treasure." And there at that moment, Yitzhak realized the rest of his dream. And so he thanked the captain of the guard. He returned to his home, dug underneath his own fireplace, and there found the buried treasure. He went and provided for his family, and then created a Beit Midrash, a house of a place of study. So here is the wonderful thing. What's the moral of the story? Jump in. Well, there are two different major morals to the story. I want to see which one you all are going to jump into. You can have many sub-morals, but.
Yeah, I have a suggestion that it's not far away from you. It's up there in the heavens, speaking of God's teaching, but it's right here in your heart, or hearth.
Your hearth, yeah. Great. So your moral is it was there all the time if he had just looked for it.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Anybody else?
What?
Remember, I can be silent longer than anybody. Done 8-day silent meditation and retreats. So a second possible moral. Can anybody think of the reverse moral?
Well, I think you have to sometimes leave your home to find out how important your home is, or to leave and travel and get outside of yourself to find out what is in yourself and others close to you.
Great. So we've got two different morals. Which one is right? Don't answer that. So
how about a third?
Sure, go for a third. And let me introduce someone that you all may have met before, my friend Rabbi Mark Gruber, who's visiting in Pittsburgh and has come to the Minyan at Temple Sinai before.
I'll show myself to talk.
Okay.
So I think there's also a moral that we have to pay attention and listen well to our own dreams, that there may be some message in them, and to others, that Yitzhak could have blown off the captain of the guards, but he listened to him. He could have blown off both dreams and just said, "Boy, what a bunch of nonsense this is," but he paid enough attention to follow through. And I think that's important as well.
So I am going to throw, probably I shouldn't, but I'll throw one other piece on it. There is a fascinating field called faith development. It's how do we grow in our faith and in our view of seeing the world. And so faith does not necessarily have to be faith in God. Faith in one formulation of this is just the way you organize your world. The idea that I'm going to share with you is from Gabriel Moran. And he said, that a belief when we're young is called our people's religion, that whatever faith we learn from our family is the faith. You ever have that experience of saying something and you think, oh my God, I'm possessed, my parents are talking through me? Yeah, so that's our people's religion. Then in adolescence, we go to disbelief. It's not that we reject all belief, it's that we see the flaws in the systems that we've grown up with. And then after that, we come to parabolic faith, that rather than just black or white, or pick two diametrically opposed or seemingly diametrically opposed colors, red or green, that's a good dichotomy. I think we'll use that from now on instead of black and white. It's I just saying that, I think the change is important now. Then again, of course, I have to be careful because people who are colorblind can't tell the difference between red and green. So, but rather than seeing the world as split into categories, the thing about a parable is that it can be seen in different ways. And that as we grow, I love my mother, I hate my mother, I love and I hate my mother at the same time. It gives us a broader way of looking at the world. So it's the thing I love about the Hasidic tale is that it's open and we each bring our own pieces and our own life. And together, as was so beautifully, man, I didn't think we'd go where we did when I asked the question, but how we all become Torah. And each of us brings a Torah and our own insights. Shabbat Shalom.
Oseh shalom dimroma, hu yaser shalom aleinu, le'al kol Yisrael, ve'imu amen. Oseh shalom dimroma, hu yaser shalom Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaser Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'yimeru, Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. This Shabbat we're reading from Parashat Va'et Hanan, the fourth Aliyah, that's Deuteronomy 5, 1 to 18. And it's a special Shabbat, Shabbat Nachamu, named after the special Haftarah by Isaiah, Comfort, O comfort my people. The second Parsha continues the speech of Moses to the people as they stand on the east side of the Jordan. They're ready to cross over into the promised land, but not before they hear a lot more from Moses. The Parsha's name comes from the first word, Va'et Hanan. Moses says, I pleaded with God to let me cross over, but God refused and then relented enough to let me see the land of Canaan. Then Moses continues with appeals to observe God's laws as revealed at Sinai, but in Deuteronomy it's called Horev. The fourth Aliyah focuses on the revelation and the covenant at Horev, and the same 10 commandments that we read in Exodus with some changes and elaborations. And they're not actually called commandments, but sayings or pronouncements. Aseret HaDivrot, from daber, to speak, which is the same root as dvarim, the name of this book, which consists more than the other books of words spoken as speeches. Moses also tells the people to set up cities of refuge once they get to the land, and then he discusses the laws at Horev and gives more teachings and explains the importance of separating themselves from their new neighbors. We are sanctified to be Adonai's people, but they are worshipers of false gods. And most of all, we must love and be loyal to Adonai. God's love for us is the reason for the laws and the reason that God is so angry with us when we sneak off to worship those other gods and betray him. ויקרא משה אל כל ישראל ויאמר עליהם, שמע ישראל את החוקים והמשפטים אשר אנוכי דובר באוזניכם היום, ולמדתם אותם ושמרתם לעשותם. Moses summoned all the Israelites and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the laws and rules that I proclaim to you this day. Study them and observe them carefully. Adonai Eloheinu karati manu brit bechorev. Adonai our God made a covenant with us at Horev. Lo et avotenu karat Adonai et habrit azot ki itanu. Anachnu ele po hayom kulanu chayim. It was not with our fathers that Adonai made this covenant, but with us, the living, every one of us who is here today. Panim befanim diber Adonai imachem bahar mitoch ha'esh. Face to face, Adonai spoke to you on the mountain out of the fire. Anochi omed ben Adonai uveinechem ba'et hahi, להגיד לכם את דבר אדוני, כי יראיתם מפני האש ולא עליתם בהר, לאמור. I stood between Adonai and you at that time to convey Adonai's words to you, for you were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain, saying, Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, מבית עבדים. I, the Eternal, am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Lo yihya lecha Elohim acherim al panai. You shall have no other gods beside me. Lo ta'aseh lecha fesel kol tmuna asher bashamayim mi'al va'asher ba'aretz mitachat v'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, any likeness of what is in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters below the earth. Lo tishtachaveh lahem v'lo ta'ovdeim, ki anochi Adonai Elohecha el kana poked avon avot al banim ve'al shileshim ve'al ribeim lesonai. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, For I, the eternal, am your God and impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generations of those who reject me. ועושה חסד לאלפים לאוהבי ולשומרי מצוותי. But showing kindness to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. לא תישא את שם אדוני אלוהיך לשווא, כי לא ינקה אדוני את אשר יישא את שמו לשווא. You shall not swear falsely by the name of Adonai your God, for Adonai will not clear one who swears falsely by God's name. שמור את יום השבת לקדשו, כאשר ציווך Adonai Elohecha. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as Adonai your God has commanded you. ששת ימים תעבוד ועשית כל מלאכתך. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. ויום השביעי שבת לאדוני אלוהיך. לא תעשה כל מלאכה אתה ובנך וביתך ועבדך ואמתך ברשותך וחמורך וכל בהמתך וגרך אשר בשעריך, למען ינוח עבדך ואמתך כמוך. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of Adonai your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. And by the way, this is different from Exodus, because there we were supposed to keep Shabbat in imitation of God. But here it's so that we may rest too. וזכרת כי עבד היית בארץ מצרים, ויוציאך אדוני אלוהיך משם, ביד חזקה ובזרוע נטויה, על כן ציווך אדוני אלוהיך לעשות את יום השבת. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, Adonai your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. כבד את אביך ואת אמך, כאשר ציווך אדוני אלוהיך, למען יאריכון ימיך, ולמען ייטב לך על האדמה אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך. Honor your father and your mother, as Adonai your God has commanded you, that you may long endure, and that you may fare well in the land that Adonai your God is assigning to you. לא תרצח ולא תנאף ולא תגנוב ולא תענה ברעך עד שווא. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. ולא תחמוד אשת רעך ולא תתאווה בית רעך, שדהו ועבדו ואמתו, שורו וחמורו, וכל אשר לרעך. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not crave your neighbor's house, or his field, or his male or female slave, or his ox, or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. So Deuteronomy doesn't begin the way that we might expect, which is, Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses saying, tell the Israelites something. Instead, it's Moses. It's mostly all Moses. These are the words that Moses spoke to the people. And he's at the center. He's pleading, he's justifying, he's thundering, even when he's quoting God. It's a highly rhetorical presentation, and rhetoric is the art of persuasion, and that's what he's trying to do. And if I can get this right, I think I can have the opportunity to go back and show you a few specific things at the beginning here. I am not sure because I've never used this feature on the pointer, but I'll see if this works. If not, I'll just tell you anyway. So Moses says to them on the second line, verse 1. Whoops, that didn't do it. You're probably not seeing that, are you? Anyway, the rules and the laws that I proclaim to you this day, Asher Anochi Dover Beoznechem. So there's several interesting things here. Anochi is a more formal way to say ani, I. And it's used a lot in Deuteronomy, and Moses uses it a lot in this speech. And Dover, I am telling you, I am proclaiming you. He could have said medaber, which just means speak, but this is also more formal, and it's more like being a spokesperson, a spokesman. And be'oznechem makes it very immediate, in your ears directly, not just to you. And it's second person. He's going to be saying everything here, addressing the people in the second person, sometimes plural, sometimes even more personally in the first person. Hayom, and then he says today. And there's also going to be a big emphasis on today, on the immediacy of this whole thing. Let me just show you a couple more things if I can. On verse 3, he says, it was not with our fathers that Adonai made this covenant. Now that, you could say that's not exactly correct, or let's say it's a different version of what we've seen before, because Adonai, of course, has made this covenant with our ancestors in the past. But again, he wants to be very immediate and to say, this is us. This is talking about us. And then the rest of that, but with us. So it's ki itanu, with us, anachnu, we, and Ela, those, po, who are here, hayom, today, kulanu, all of us, hayim, living. Again, the emphasis, because the background of this, of course, is that these are not the people who were there at Sinai. That was their fathers, and they all had to die out. And this is the generation that's going to be allowed to go into the land. So that gives you an idea of the emphatic quality of all this and the immediacy of it. And then just one more verse, on verse 4, panim befanim, face to face, Adonai spoke to you from the midst of the fire. When in fact, as he goes on to say, God didn't really speak to you face to face. And you could say he never spoke to Moses exactly face to face. At least Moses could never see his face. But it's more important to show this actually happening. And then finally, on verse 5, Anochi omed be'en Adonai uve'nechem ba'et hahi. And here I am standing. The translation says I stood between Adonai and you at that time, but it's really present tense. I'm standing here as if he's recreating the whole scene. So, okay, I hope that was enough to give you some idea of the level of rhetoric here. Historically, this emphatic rhetoric was probably meant to speak to Israelites centuries later who had fallen away from worshiping God. Deuteronomy was said to be a scroll that was discovered hidden away in a dusty corner of the temple. And Isaiah used it for his, sorry, not Isaiah, King Josiah used it for his religious revival. And it still speaks to us as it stresses beliefs, ethical behavior, and social justice. In terms of the literary composition and the portrayal of Moses, I see him not so much as a grouchy, dispirited old man at the end of his strength. To me, it's not clear that a man like that could produce these speeches. But as a man who's facing serious disappointment, but is still burning to leave a legacy for his people And at the height of his speaking power, remember at the beginning, he wasn't capable of speaking and Aaron had to do it for him. And this might be a spoiler alert, but probably not. This is what the eulogy at the end of the book tells us, that when God took away the last breath of Moses, his visual acuity did not dim and his vigor was unabated, and his legacy remained.
Yasher koach Chaya. We turn our thoughts to those in our community, in our families who are in need of healing. And as we did last week, I'm going to invite you to think of them, type their names into the chat. This first verse is for you, to remind you of the blessings that you and each of us needs for healing and wholeness. And then we'll offer the names of those in our lives and in our community who are in need of healing before singing the second verse for them.
May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
On this Shabbat, we think of George and Kathy, Bobby and Marina, Holly and Michael, Zachary and Jason, Steve, Bonnie, Patty, Robert, Beth, Tina, Claudia, Jen, Helen, Howard, Yaakov Ben Shalom, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all with COVID-19. And Jeffrey, I want to make sure that if you have someone you're thinking of, you get a chance. We also have Haji Maniana's grandparents. So many in our community and our world. Also thinking of Esther.
Bless those in need of healing with refuah Shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We invite Jerry Gordon to continue with the Haftarah blessings and reading.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today's Haftarah I believe there's value in very briefly framing it with respect to time, place, and purpose. It was written by an anonymous prophet sitting in exile in Babylon after the exile. Nebuchadnezzar has destroyed Judah, Jerusalem, and the first temple in 586 BCE and exiled the leadership and many Israelites to Babylon. This Haftorah represents an impassioned, inspiring pep talk with an upbeat message, much like we need now in the COVID-19 pandemic. The vaccine is coming. The vaccine is coming. Hang in there. The vaccine is coming. What does the prophet say in the Haftorah? Your God is strong, stronger than the Babylonian gods. Your God has not abandoned you, nor has your God forgotten you. Your God has forgiven you, and your punishment is over. You will soon return to Zion. And then, after 50 years of exile, Cyrus of Persia is God's agent who defeats the Babylonians and liberates the Israelites to rebuild Jerusalem. We'll begin with the blessing for the Haftorah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nbiim tovim uveratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'b'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael lamo u'b'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek. Nachamu, nachamu, ami yomar Elohechem. Comfort, O comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and declare to her that her term of service is over, that her iniquity is expiated, for she has received at the hand of Adonai double for all of her sins. A voice rings out, clear in the desert, a road for Adonai, level in the wilderness, a highway for our God. Let every valley be raised, every hill and mountain made low. Let the rugged ground become level and the ridges become a plain. The presence of Adonai shall appear, and all flesh as one shall behold, for Adonai has spoken. A voice rings out, proclaim. Another asks, what shall I proclaim? All flesh is grass, all its goodness like flowers of the field. Grass withers, flowers fade, when the breath of Adonai blows on them. Indeed, man is but grass. Grass withers, flowers fade, but the word of our God is always fulfilled. Ascend a lofty mountain, O herald of joy to Zion. Raise your voice with power, O herald of joy to Yerushalayim. Raise it, have no fear. Announce it to the cities of Judah. Behold your God. Behold, Adonai God come in might, and his arm wins triumph for him. See, his reward is with him, his recompense before him. Like a shepherd, he pastures his flock. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them in his bosom. Gently he drives the mother sheep. Who measures the waters with the hollow of his hand, and gauged the skies with a span, and meted earth's dust with a measure, and weighed the mountains with a scale, and the hills with a balance? Who has plumbed the mind of Adonai? What man could tell the plan of God? Whom did he consult, and who taught him, guided him in the right of way? Who guided him in knowledge, and showed him the path of wisdom? The nations are but a drop in a bucket, reckoned as dust on a balance. The very coastlands God lifts like motes. Lebanon is not fuel enough, nor its beasts enough for sacrifice. All nations are as naught in God's sight. God accounts them as less than nothing. To whom then can you liken God? What form compared to him? The idol? A woodworker shaped it, and a smith overlaid it with gold, forging links of silver. As a gift, he chooses the mulberry, a wood that does not rot. Then seeks a skilled woodworker to make a firm idol that will not topple. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Have you not been told from the very first? Have you not discerned how the earth was founded? It is God who enthroned above the vault of the earth, so that its inhabitants seem as grasshoppers, who spread over the sky like gauze, stretch them like a tent to dwell in. God brings potentates to naught, makes rulers of the earth as nothing. Hardly are they planted, hardly are they sown, hardly has their stem taken root in earth, when God blows upon them and they dry up, and the storm bears them off like straw. To whom then can you liken me? To whom can I be compared, says the Holy One. Lift high your eyes and see. Who created these? God, who sends out their host by count, who calls them each by name. Because of God's great might and vast power, not one fails to appear. And now we'll finish with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzaddik b'kol hadorot, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת בצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושו ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. Baruch atah Adonai Makadesh HaShabbat.
Hi, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Just a few goings on at Temple. And Rabbi Crystal, I may need you to do this before Yuval gets too fussy.
Let me find it.
But we have Havdalah tonight at 8:45. There should be a link in the weekly email.
Well, I can take it if you've got Yuval. So this evening, we have Torah study. We have Havdalah at 8:45. Wednesday, we have Parashah at noon. We have Cook Along with Deborah Friedman at 6:30. The menu will include biscotti, both chocolate and lemon. Shabbat evening, next is Friday at 7. We still have meet and greets with Rabbi Crystal. I'd like to get more people. I'm considering a raffle. And you think I'm kidding. I may not be kidding. And then we'll be beginning on August 10th, Judaism in the 21st century. And Shabbat Shalom. And Rabbi Gorban, give us a sign if you would like me to continue with the Aleinu and the Kaddish.
I think he is quiet for the moment. We'll see what happens. Rabbi Kerman wants to know what you get in the raffle.
I haven't decided yet. When I was in New York, we had a congregants who owned a giftwares business. So there, I spent 18 years being used to raffles. So I'm thinking about it.
So we continue with Aleinu. There are more questions for you in the chat, but we continue with Aleinu. Please rise as you are able or choose. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gdula leyotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. השבותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים עמך, ועל הארץ מתחתנו. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. As we turn to the mourner's Kaddish, I'll invite anyone who is in a period of mourning or observing a yard site to unmute yourself and share the name with us and their relationship with you.
My mother, Sarah Shurinsky.
My father, Robert Rosenberg.
Charlene Aaronworth, wife.
Go ahead, David.
Charlene Aaronworth, wife.
My uncle Roy Sean Farber.
And my grandfather, Shmuel or Mula, for whom Yuval Shalev is named. We join together in the words of Kaddish for those we love and for those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. I know, when we think of them, it's sad. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mivarach le'olam u'amei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shmei dekudasha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'miran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all the world, and to all of us who mourn our beloved dead, as together we say, Amen. We'll conclude with Vishamru. If you've got some wine or grape juice near you, it's traditional to sing this instead of the Friday evening Kiddush, which includes a sanctification of Shabbat. For the Saturday morning Kiddush, which does not, we use Vishamru as that sanctification. So we'll join in together. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat lidorotam berit olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat lidorotam berit olam. Beini ubein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat lidorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat lidorotam berit olam. U'hayom hashvi Shabbat v'inafash, Shabbat v'inafash, Shabbat v'inafash. Vishamru Bnei Israel et Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.